Imagine you haven't heard from your dad in months.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a drifter,
Yeah.
so you're not immediately alarmed. But
Yeah.
as time passes, a nagging worry starts to take root,
Yeah.
and you decide to track him down,
Okay.
only to find yourself on a remote farm in Oregon,
Uh,
face to face with a woman who claims your father just up and left one day.
wow.
That's the beginning of our story today. A deep dive into a chilling true crime case that'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about rural life.
This case is truly fascinating because it takes those classic tropes of idyllic farm life and flips them on their head.
Okay.
It all starts with Susan Monica, a former engineer who traded the hustle and bustle of San Francisco for the peace and quiet of a 20-acre farm in Weimar, Oregon.
So she's not your typical farmer. This woman had a whole other life before she ended up in rural Oregon.
Right, and it wasn't just a change of scenery. Susan was looking for self-sufficiency, a life off the grid.
Okay.
She bought this plot of land in 1991, and it was nothing but wilderness. No house, no barn, just raw potential.
Talk about a project.
Yeah,
She basically built her entire life from scratch out there.
she did, and it seems like her engineering background really came in handy. She built her own barn, a shack to live in animal pens.
Wow.
The whole work's quite a testament to her determination.
But a 20-acre farm is a lot for one person to handle, even someone as resourceful as Susan.
Exactly. After a few years, she realized she needed help and started hiring transient workers or people who had trouble finding jobs elsewhere, often due to criminal records.
Oh, okay.
These temporary employees would come and go for about 20 years.
20 years? That's a long time to have people drifting in and out of your life like that.
It is, and for the most part, it seems like they just disappeared into the ether after leaving the farm until that is 2014.
Okay, here we go. 2014, what happened?
That's when things take a dark turn. One day, 3 visitors arrive at Susan's farm, 2 young men and a young woman. They introduce themselves as the children of Robert Haney, a man who had worked for Susan and lived in a camper on her property.
So these are adult children looking for their father. They must have been pretty worried.
Absolutely. Robert would usually check in with them every couple of months, but they hadn't heard from him in quite some time. He didn't have a cell phone or a permanent address, which made finding him incredibly difficult.
Why?
They just wanted to make sure he was okay.
And what does Susan tell them about Robert?
She remembers him, of course.
Yeah.
She tells them that he was a good worker. At first, hardworking, quiet, kept to himself.
Okay.
He even had a friendly dog. But then about 5 months into his employment, things changed.
Oh, sounds like trouble brewing.
Robert started drinking heavily, neglecting his work, and spending his days ranting about getting revenge on someone.
Revenge? That's pretty intense. Do we know who he was talking about?
Susan found out that one of Robert's children had been assaulted,
Oh, wow.
and he felt incredibly guilty that he wasn't there to protect them.
Right.
The drinking and the talk of revenge were his way of coping with that guilt, it seems.
Understandable, but definitely concerning, especially given his sudden disappearance.
Right. Susan was actually planning to confront Robert about his behavior and possibly fire him, but before she could, Robert approached her, handed her an envelope full of cash, and asked her to look after his dog.
Okay.
Then he got into a stranger's car and drove away.
That's strange. It seems so out of character after all the ranting and the drinking.
It definitely doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Susan agreed to care for the dog, and that was the last she saw of Robert.
Wow.
She took his children to his camper, and inside they found all of his belongings, including his tool belt.
Wait, his tool belt? I thought you said he was a traveling handyman. Why would he leave that behind? That's how he made a living.
Exactly. That discovery raised a lot of red flags for Robert's children.
Yeah.
They thanked Susan for her time and told her to contact them if she learned anything about their father, but they weren't satisfied with her explanation.
Of course not. So what did they do?
They went straight to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office to file a missing person report.
It must have been frustrating. Robert's transient lifestyle, no cell phone, no permanent address, made it incredibly hard to track him down.
It did, but the investigators shared the children's concerns about Robert's drinking, his talk of revenge, and his sudden disappearance.
Yeah.
They were worried he might have acted on his threats.
So they needed something, anything that could help them locate Robert.
And then one of Robert's children mentioned his EBT card.
Oh, okay.
The investigators saw this as their best shot at tracking him down.
Smart thinking. EBT cards are traceable, right?
Yes. The card activity showed that it had been used at a Walmart about 30 minutes away from Susan's farm just a month earlier.
Okay.
It wasn't a direct link to Robert, but it was the only lead they had.
So they headed to the Walmart, hoping to find some answers in the security footage.
Yeah.
What did they find?
They reviewed hours of footage, but Robert was nowhere to be seen.
Okay.
However, they did see something that changed the course of the investigation completely.
Don't leave us hanging. What did they see?
They saw Susan Monica using Robert's EBT card.
Whoa, that's a huge twist. Suddenly, the helpful farm owner is looking very suspicious.
Absolutely armed with this new information, the investigators wasted no time in securing a search warrant for Susan's farm.
Okay, this is getting intense. What happened when they got to the farm?
That's where things get really unsettling. We'll pick up the story there in part 2. When the sheriff and his deputies arrived at Susan Monica's farm, she came out to greet them completely unaware of the gravity of the situation.
I bet she was thinking they were just there to ask a few routine questions.
Probably they told her they were searching the property in connection with Robert Haney's disappearance, and before she could even react, they directed her inside for questioning talk about a rude awakening.
So while Susan's being questioned inside, the deputies are outside searching the property, right?
Exactly. Meanwhile, the sheriff confronts Susan about the security footage from Walmart, accusing her of stealing Robert's EBT card.
Oh, he goes straight for the jugular. No beating around the bush.
He does it, and at first Susan is shocked, but then she seems almost relieved, like she's been waiting for this moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she tells the sheriff that she didn't steal the card. Robert gave it to her along with some cash when he left, asking her to use it for his dog's food.
So she's sticking to the story that she was just doing Robert a favor.
She insists that Robert also gave her the P-Mine, which is why she was able to use the card.
Does the sheriff buy it?
He's skeptical, of course, but he doesn't have any concrete evidence to contradict her story. Just as he's about to call off the search, a deputy bursts into the kitchen and whispers something to him. The sheriff's face goes pale. It's clear something terrible has been found.
Okay, now I'm really on the edge of my seat. What did the deputy find?
The deputy found a human leg on the property.
A leg. Oh my God, this is taking a horrific turn.
It is. Everything changes in an instant. The sheriff immediately takes Susan into custody for further questioning.
Now they're at the police station. Susan's in the interrogation room. The tension must have been palpable.
You can imagine the sheriff starts recording the interrogation, sits down across from Susan, and asks her one simple, chilling question.
Yeah.
Has anyone died on your property?
That question has to send chills down your spine. What does Susan say?
She confirms that everything she said about Robert's disappearance was true, but then she drops a bombshell. She admits that Robert actually returned to the farm after leaving with the stranger in the car.
So he came back but didn't tell anyone? Didn't try to contact his kids?
Apparently not. Susan describes how she discovered Robert's return one morning while she was feeding her animals. She noticed her pigs behaving strangely.
Oh,
They were all congregated in one spot, intently focused on something on the ground.
oh no, I think I know where this is going. This is where the pigs come into play, right?
Yes, and it's a truly gruesome scene. Susan walks over to the pig pen and realizes that the pigs aren't just looking at something, they're eating something, and that something is Robert Haney.
That's just horrific.
It is. Susan describes finding Robert lying on his back, his insides torn out, being eaten alive by her pigs.
Was he still alive at that point?
Horrifyingly. Susan says he was still moving and groaning, obviously, in a lot of pain.
Did she try to help him?
She says she tried to pull the pigs off Robert, but they were in a feeding frenzy. She considered moving him, but he was already so badly injured.
Yeah.
She says she was afraid moving him would kill him instantly.
So what did she do?
She claims that out of mercy, she left the pen, got a shotgun from her barn, and shot Robert.
I mean, in that situation, what else could she have done?
That's a difficult question to answer. It's such a horrific scenario.
So what happened after she shot him?
3 days later, Susan went back to the pen, gathered what was left of Robert's body, and threw it onto a trash pile in her barn.
But the deputy found a leg outside the barn, right?
Yeah.
So those remains didn't stay hidden for long.
That's right. When confronted about the leg, Susan suggested that a wild animal must have dragged it out of the barn. The sheriff, of course, wants to know why she didn't call 911, why she didn't report any of this to the authorities.
What was her explanation?
Susan says she was afraid her pigs would be euthanized if anyone found out what they'd done. She relied on selling their meat as a source of income and was worried that people wouldn't buy it if they knew her pigs were well-eating people.
It's a twisted logic, but
Yeah.
I guess I can see where she's coming from. A desperation can make people do strange things.
It's a chilling insight into her mindset. Susan then leads the investigators to where they can find the rest of Robert's remains, and even agrees to take a polygraph test to prove she's telling the truth.
Okay, but did she actually pass the polygraph? Her story seems pretty far-fetched.
That's where things get even more bizarre during the first test. Susan was so fidgety, coughing and sighing dramatically that the operator couldn't get accurate readings.
Oh, wow.
The second test was also disrupted by her behavior.
So she was creating to sabotage the test, but why?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she knew she couldn't pass. Either way, it raised even more suspicion. The investigators were frustrated and told Susan that they were going to conduct a thorough search of her property, and if they found anything she hadn't disclosed, she would be in serious trouble.
The stakes just got a lot higher. What happened next?
At that point, Susan's demeanor changed. She grabbed a pen and paper and started drawing a map of her farm. When she finished, she marked a large X on the map and slid it across the table to the investigators. If you go to that X, she said, you'll find Stephen.
Stephen is Stephen.
This revelation added another layer of darkness to the investigation. Stephen Delacino was another farmhand who had worked for Susan a year before Robert.
So Robert might not have been the first victim?
That's right. It was starting to look like there was another piece to this puzzle, according to Susan. Stephen was a quiet, hardworking employee, but they had a falling out. She suspected him of stealing guns from her barn and confronted him about it. During the confrontation, they got into a fight, and Susan claimed that a gun went off, accidentally killing Stephen.
Another accidental shooting, really.
That was her story, and just like with Robert, she claimed that as Stephen lay dying in the pig pen, the pigs descended upon him and devoured his body.
Wow, she's really doubling down on this explanation. But 2 accidental shootings, both ending with the victims being eaten by pigs, it's almost impossible to believe.
It does stretch the limits of credibility, and of course the investigators asked her again why she didn't call 911.
Right.
Her answer was the same. She was afraid for her pig's safety and her livelihood.
So it seems like self-preservation was her primary motivator.
That's how it appears, but what's really unsettling is that despite how outlandish Susan's stories sound, there wasn't any evidence to directly contradict her claims.
So the case basically hinged on whether the jury believed her or not?
Exactly. And when Susan Monica went on trial for the murders of Robert Haney and Stephen Delacino.
So the jury had to decide, was Susan Monica a cold-blooded killer or an unfortunate woman caught in a series of horrific events?
That's right. They had to weigh Susan's claims of self-defense against the sheer improbability of 2 accidental shootings, both ending with the victims being consumed by pigs.
Yeah, it's a tough call.
It is.
I can't even imagine being in that jury room trying to sort through all the details and decide what really happened on that farm.
It must have been incredibly difficult, and in the end, the jury found Susan Monica's story unbelievable.
I can't say I'm surprised 2 accidental shootings. It does seem a little too convenient.
Right. In April 2015, Susan Monica was convicted of 2 counts of murder, 1 for Robert Haney and 1 for Stephen Delacino, and 2 counts of abusing a corpse.
Wow. So she was found guilty on all charges.
She was, and the judge sentenced her to a minimum of 50 years in prison.
Wow. That's basically a life sentence. She'll likely spend the rest of her days behind bars.
It is a significant sentence, and even after the trial, after being convicted and sentenced, Susan continued to make unsettling claims.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she said there were 17 other bodies buried on her property.
17? That's a staggering number. Did they ever find any evidence to support those claims?
Despite extensive searches, no other remains were ever found.
Hmm.
So we're left with more questions than answers. Was Susan Monica telling the truth about those 17 other bodies? Or were those claims just the ramblings of a disturbed mind? We may never know for sure.
It's a chilling thought, either way. This case highlights just how vulnerable people like Robert Haney and Stephen Delacino can be.
It does. Transient workers, especially those who have been involved with the criminal justice system, often live on the fringes of society.
Right.
They may not have strong support networks or the means to protect themselves from exploitation.
It's a sad reminder that sometimes people disappear and no one even notices.
And this case also raises some disturbing questions about animal behavior. Those pigs, it's hard to shake that image.
I know what you mean. It's a reminder that even animals we consider domesticated can be unpredictable and even dangerous under certain circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. It challenges our assumptions about the natural world and reminds us that we can't always predict how animals will behave.
Well, this has been a truly unsettling story. A seemingly idyllic farm, a seemingly harmless woman, and a series of horrifying events that defy explanation.
It's a reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah.
And that even in the most peaceful settings, darkness can lurk beneath the surface.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Scary Tales Untold. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the case of Susan Monica and her pigs, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Until next time.